Hi, friends. Hello, and welcome to another video. Today, we're going to be talking about has the world turned pro China all of a sudden? Welcome once again to our show. I'm today with Jerry Gray to pick on his brain and tell us a little bit what is taking place with all this positivity that is coming out from the West. Jerry, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much. And it's great to be back on the Media Without Means show.
All right, so I'm the looks, you're the brain. So let's get started with some of the things that you have seen changing over the last few days that we could look at them as positivity from the media towards China.
Yeah, yeah. There has definitely been some positivity towards China, but I don't think it's time to celebrate and put on our party hats and blow whistles. And I'm certainly not retiring from what I'm doing yet. We still have a very, very large hill to climb. The most obvious one was there was in one particular day, there were three articles from the BBC which were positive. And then a lot of
Mm,
people were saying, well, this is because of the removal of the funding from USAID or USAID. The simple thing is that those two things are probably not connected. A lot of people
mm,
in my comment section are saying to me, the BBC are now saying, well, screw you, America. If you're not going to give us the money, we're going to be positive about China. I honestly don't think that's the case because there are still quite a lot of negative stories about China on the BBC. They still have Stephen McDonnell in Beijing. They still have an inherent bias towards China. There's no question about
mm,
that. But I think what they might be starting to do is to start to, the government in the UK, and the government owns the BBC, and the people pay for the BBC through their licenses. The government is starting to realize that they do need, because they can't get support from Europe. Europe doesn't care about little old Britain anymore. They won't be getting support from the USA despite this special arrangement that they have, because Keir Starmer and Donald Trump are not going to get along. I mean, diplomatically, yes. Politically, yes. Personally, no. They grate on each other. They're not getting along very well. So we're not going to see Donald Trump supporting the BBC anymore. We're not going to see Donald Trump supporting the UK. And I think the UK realized now that the CPTPP, which is the partnership in the Pacific, which they are a member of, China is
mm.
applying to be a member of, and Britain needs to be one of the people that says yes, they can join. So there's that. So China still needs the UK, but in terms of its trade, the UK absolutely needs China. And the UK are starting to realize this, and people in the UK must be realizing this. But in order to be politically savvy, you have to slowly change the public perception. You can't just suddenly do a U-turn. What you have to do is you slowly ratchet up the positivity on China, because the moment a politician says we need China and they're actually not a bad bunch of people over there, they're nice
They're
people
out.
and we can help, then it's political suicide.
I remember you mentioned something a few days ago, a few weeks ago, perhaps, that you were thinking that maybe Wang Yi's visit to Britain, to the UK, had something to do with the positivity, trying to like rob a little bit the good side of China during his visit.
Yeah.
Um, but probably that has been extended for other reasons. This particular South China Morning Post approach that you suggest, I think that that's where they're going. They're trying to be okay. Let's be a little bit more balanced because there are interests on the line that we should look after. So definitely something to note on that
Mm.
particular move. Have
Well,
there been
let's
any
not
other
forget
elements?
the,
Yeah.
sorry, let's not forget the Wang Yi visit was an unscheduled visit. He was invited from Munich because he had some free time before he went off to South Africa and other places as well. But he was invited from the Munich conference, the security conference. He was invited to the UK. Now, that's a very, very important observation to make. You don't just travel around the world as a diplomat like Wang Yi does, and suddenly step out of your itinerary to go on an unscheduled visit to another country. That's just not how it works usually. So this was quite
Significant.
important for, I think, for both sides. I think China needs the UK for its ascension to the CPTPP, but I think UK needs China for its mere survival. It's as simple as that. And I think that the pair of the countries have started to realize this. And I just hope that I'm right. I could be wrong, but I hope that I'm right. And it will mean that public perception of China needs to change, and you can't just suddenly turn that on its head. You have to slowly ratchet up so that people start seeing more positivity and less negativity. And I think that's where we are, at least with the BBC. But there's a lot more that we can talk about today on other matters as well.
Sure, there's so many angles and so many perspectives that are making China look so positive. I
Mm.
just saw three different aspects of science in medicine here in China that have made headlines. And you see them cover, although not to the extent that they deserve, like the cure of diabetes, another one for cancer. And just earlier today, I read from a good friend, Luke, that there's now a study that has positively cured Parkinson's. So
Yep. And
there are
Alzheimer's
some,
as well. There's been a surgical procedure that cures Alzheimer's, not cures, but stops Alzheimer's in its tracks. So here we've got
so
Alzheimer's, we've got Parkinson's disease, we've got some forms of cancer, we've got diabetes, and they're all happening here. That's
and
fantastic.
the tagline that we are missing with all this coverage, particularly, for example, from BBC, is the "but at what cost?"
Yeah.
That's not there for a few days now. Now, we would be remiss if we don't talk briefly, because we've done videos about this before, and a lot of people have talked about this. But the effect of Red Note. Red
Mm.
Note has become a way for people to see China for what it really is. I am very much focused on Xinjiang and all these organizations that are dedicated to presenting Xinjiang in the wrong light, literally just lying about Xinjiang. So
Mm.
one of the things that people have observed is that there aren't too many accounts constantly attacking Xinjiang lately. That is until
Mm.
the last couple of days when a tweet by some Turkish person was retweeted from 2021, if I'm not mistaken, and it's gotten a lot of views and it's gotten a lot of people talking about it. It's one of those cartoons and those illustrations from Amnesty International, and people are coming back with these accusations of forced labor or genocide or human rights abuses and whatnot. And well, what I have noticed is the amount of people just telling them to just check around the corner to see if it's raining, because
Yeah.
people are fed up with these lies. People are already seeing through the lies. But the fact that Xiao Hongsu has opened the eyes to too many people, I don't know how much in Europe or in the UK, if you have talked to people over there, but at least in America, it has opened the eyes to too many people, to the point where there's already a video circulating again on X, on Twitter, on the internet, of some Chinese guy asking Americans not to deprecate their country so much, to be strong and try to show the positive side of America to their followers on Xiaohongshu. I
Yeah.
found that a very interesting twist, because there's this Chinese person telling Americans, hey, don't go there and show that there's homeless. Don't go there and tell them that you can't afford eggs. Don't go there and tell them that you need to work 3 jobs. Don't like I'm like, so go there and lie? Is that what you're trying to tell them to do?
It it's an interesting thing. I love the word ratioed, and what I'm seeing now on things like Twitter. Now, it may be because I live in, or we live in, a kind of a bubble of agreement with a lot of people. We have our own little echo chamber where I'm very keen to block people out of my life when they are obnoxious or rude or just ignorant. If
Mm.
someone is not prepared to listen to what I have to say and is just going to come back and say, yeah, you would say that because the CCP pays you to do it, or your social credit score goes up, I don't want to get into an argument with those people, so I just block them out of my life. Now, that does tend to put me into a kind of a bubble of agreement where a lot of
Mm.
people in my following are people that I agree with, who agree with me. So there's that. But when you look at one of those comments, and underneath it, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of comments that are all telling them, you're an idiot. They've been ratioed. And that is telling me that there are more people on the side of truth than there are on the side of the lies. Now,
Mm.
one thing that we need to talk about, because you've called this, has the world turned pro-China now? I would suggest that the world has always been pro, not always, but most of the world is pro-China anyway. It is today, and it has been for a long, long time. What we're talking about here is what one of my favorite publications is Pearls and Irritations, which is run
Mm.
by a guy called John Menadue in Australia. And John Menadue has this thing which he calls white man's media. And that is what's telling us that China is bad. Mainstream media is telling us, the Anglo Saxon English language media is telling us China is bad. And where it's not in English, where it's in another language, like in Kazakhstan, it's in Kazakh, in Uzbekistan, it's in Uzbek, in Nigeria, it's in Nigerian or whatever language, in Philippines, it's Tagalog. What we're seeing there is paid for propaganda. And from last month, we're seeing a lot less of that. Those organizations are now screaming out for funding because they've just had the funding cut. Now, let's not get too excited about that because that will probably be back. But the rest of the world, about 80% of the world, is not US funded, coerced, or influenced media. 80% of the world is reading and seeing how China really is. And that is what's happening now. Without,
I agree. I
yeah,
agree with you
without
with
that
the
kind of,
funds.
yeah,
The
this,
funds are being kind of like managed now or frozen for a time being by Department of Defense, by Marco Rubio. But those operations will probably reignite at some point, simply as you have posted it before and you have mentioned it before, as Donald Trump being able to control the fourth branch of power, media,
yeah.
with those funds.
There's one other aspect, though. The Congress has control of $1.6 billion
Mm.
in order to fund negative BRI or anti-China stories. So that fund hasn't been taken over by it was the State Department, not the Defense Department, but it hasn't been taken over by the State Department. That fund still exists. There are still journalists and there is still media out there getting funding from the United States to be negative about China. That's not going to stop completely, but it has reduced, and we know that US aid has stopped, and it hasn't stopped the kids getting their milk and the babies who were starving. It hasn't stopped them. What it has stopped is all of this nasty media campaigns, these training colleges for spotting misinformation and really how to write misinformation. Basically, they train you. Anything that the Chinese or the Russians tell you is misinformation. That's the training we're going to give you. So we're not going to show you anything from RT. They don't train people. They're training people the wrong way, and that's all stopped now. So there's a positivity about it, but I'm not 100% optimistic that it's all over.
Mm. I thank you for catching me on that mistake. I misspoke when I said Department of Defense is the Department of State. Rubio is the State Department,
Mm.
in the State Department. But all these changes that seem to be happening. I mean, we actually talked about something rather interesting that we saw that was shared by a friend of ours, Noah Lee, on WeChat. There are a couple of very influential YouTubers. I think that the combined numbers are in the 3 million subscribers with the two accounts and their joint account here on YouTube. And they actually went to The Hill, a newspaper that is, well, obviously, as everybody knows, a cutout from the government in the US, to complain about what they've been experiencing since Donald Trump came to power.
Mm.
And a lot of people are making a connection, but I want you to tell me a little bit more about that. A lot of people are making, oh, maybe that's the same USAD thing that is affecting them. But you don't think that is so?
No, I don't. Um, and I think you don't think it's so either. USAID didn't change until after the inauguration, after Trump's appointment, swearing in ceremony. So USAID was not the problem here. A week or two before the inauguration happened was a few days before the inauguration happened was the TikTok deadline, and the TikTok deadline was extended. What I
Mhm.
mean by that, And we use this word, the TikTok ban, TikTok deadline. It's not TikTok. This is any social media, any app, any platform, anywhere that the president decides, and this is a presidential decision that is adversarial to the United States, can be blocked or banned. And accessing them under this law that was passed that we jokingly call the TikTok ban, anyone using a VPN to access those platforms, including TikTok, and probably DeepSeek soon, but anyone who uses a VPN to access them is guilty of a crime under the law that they wrote. Now, that law has been suspended for a little while, but that's all it is. It's suspended. And before the inauguration, many people were what they call these TikTok refugees. They were going off and having a look. Now, what then happened, and we have to remember, there are many people in the world, we have them in China, they have them in America, who you can describe as racist bigots, many of them. There are many people who are just rednecks, and there are many people who are ignorant. They're completely ignorant in the true sense of the word, that they don't really know very much. And those people can't be taught very much because their education level is quite low. Now, this is not me being facetious or nasty about Americans, but their own education department has declared that more than 50% of Americans, I think it's 52%, cannot critically read a book above grade 6 level. That's half of America cannot critically analyze information that they receive. They just take it as being true because it's in the paper. Then they say, I don't believe the paper, I don't believe the politicians, but this must be true because it's in the paper. You cannot change their minds by giving them truth and giving them a critical review of something. That's not possible. So this is what I think is happening right now. The rednecks and the racists are not going to change. They don't want to change. A lot of people who are completely ignorant don't want to change. But there's a hell of a lot of people who have suddenly decided that, wow, there's a big world out there I wasn't aware of. They're now on RedNote. They're now on Douyin. They're now on other platforms that China has opened up to them in English, and they're talking to people through AI translation. A lot of Chinese people speak English anyway, and they're finding the truth. Now, once you have found the truth, once you have spoken to someone about China who is in China, and they can show you from their own records what China is really like, you're going to say to yourself, well, those two guys have been lying to me. And one of them, the biggest one of them, has had a 72% decline in his viewer numbers since the inauguration. So this has nothing to do with Trump, nothing to do with US aid, nothing to do with the inauguration. This is simply because a lot of people have just found out the truth. And they're looking at this guy and saying, how have I been listening to this guy lying to me for so long? So we're not mentioning names today, but I think everybody who watches us knows exactly who they are. But if you're not sure, put a note in the comment and we'll tell you. But it's not our job to really disparage these guys. They are liars. They have been liars. They have both lived in China, and they both claim to be experts on China, although neither of them have been here in the last 10 years.
One of them claims to be British when he's actually South African. Have I said too much? I'll put the video here so you know I'm not lying. The interesting thing about this is we were always kind of like fighting to tell people, look, this is what we see here. This is what we see here. But it was actually RedNote and the own Chinese people, some of them who don't speak English, some of them do speak English, who were showing them the truth. And I'm like, we can't believe. So I think that the situation right now for a lot of people is like, look, you want to go talk to Chinese people? Go to Xiaohongshu, go to RedNote, talk to them. You want to get the same kind of reality, truth, and fact about China delivered to you in English or Spanish sometimes, then you can come to us. You can come and watch us and see us and well, actually learn the same things that you would learn in Xiaohongshu without the difficulty of translation or just AI, so all those things. As you said, there's still lots of work to do because this is not over. I think that animosity towards China is just getting started. Geopolitically speaking, I think that we're seeing a shuffling of the board, and we're going to see a little bit more attacks on China. But I think that these particular elements, these particularly agents of misinformation and lying, they're done. They're
Mm.
done. I don't think they're going to be coming back. They've tried to um, divert a little bit, or try other things like, oh, reviewing this or reviewing that. That's not coming back.
Yeah,
And
it's not just those on social media that we've talked about. It's also things like Epoch Times and the New Tang Dynasty Television (NTD), which is run by Falun Gong. These organizations are finding massive declines in their numbers. There was a guy from Falun Gong who was bemoaning this fact on one of their shows a while ago. I'm not going to link any of these shows because I don't want
no,
people going to have a look at them. But this is a fact you can find out for yourself. Falun Gong has also experienced exactly the same phenomenon as the social media people. Now they pretend Shenyang is in trouble in the courts. The financial controller of the Epoch Times is in trouble in the courts. The organization is in trouble in human rights issues, the whole organization. So the dance troupe has got problems. The Epoch Times has got problems. There's lots of problems going on. There's money laundering, there's human rights abuses. And this is the people accusing China without any evidence at all of what they're doing. One of their greatest claims, I'm doing some research for an article I'm writing right now. They claim to have rescued, believe this or not, 400 million people from the CCP who have now left the CCP. 400 million people have left the CCP as a result.
that's their claim.
There are only 96 million members of the CPC, but they claim to have rescued 400 million members of the CCP who have left the organization. I don't know how that's possible, but there you go. That's their latest claim.
I need to throw in my 2 cents here, because one of the journalists actually was the one behind the idea that Xi Jinping had been deposed when he first traveled outside of China and came back and was doing quarantine. Where is he? We haven't seen him. We haven't found him. Oh, he must have been deposed. Total lie, total fabrication, came out not true. The other one
He
was
had
a
a
video
heart
that
attack last month and a stroke the month before.
oh, don't get started with the 2 cups of tea. What does
Okay.
that mean? She also
Yeah.
posted a video during COVID about body bags at funeral homes
Mm.
and people waiting to be incinerated. And her video, I mean, I argued at the time with a very simple video. It's like, well, is that ethical? Okay, let's say you're a journalist and that's what you're trying to portray, that's what you're trying to show. But
Mm.
I then went into the website that shows what is the regular death rate in Beijing alone, because she was showing about 30 or 40 body bags.
Mm.
At the time, it was like 5.1 per thousand, something like that. I'll probably put the picture here if I find it.
100,000.
And given the population of Beijing, that would give you around 350 deaths per day in 2019,
It's normal.
pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
So 350, but she's showing you 30 or 40, but that becomes news.
Mm.
And these are the people that have millions of followers, that don't question what they see, that they don't bother to go and do a simple math to figure out whether, is this really worthy of being in the news? And
Mm.
once somebody is discredited, somebody is found to be lying to you about so many things, why do you still follow them? Because then you have to accept your own weakness or your own fault in being
Limitations.
fooled. Yeah, you've been fooled, and now you're the one who was fooled, and that takes a bit of courage and a little bit of self-worth to say, like, yes, sorry, I was lied to. For some people, that actually turns into anger, as we see, for example, in Xiaohongshu. People are like, we've been lied to, we've been lied to. Yeah, you've been lied to, and that's not a very positive feeling
Mm.
when you realize that you've been lied to. But at least they're awake. At least they're starting a process of pondering a little bit more, like
Yeah.
balancing information a little bit more, which is what people are asking, right? You don't need to come and believe everything that China tells you, or be 100% a China person, a supporter of China. But now you have balance. Now you have information that you can take away and build up a sense of truth, a sense of what's real out there. That's
Mm.
the positive side of what's taking place with Xiaohongshu, and that's what we're not seeing in some of these Falun Gong accounts. The people that are left there, that's why people call them a cult, because
Yes.
it's just they're completely brainwashed and completely agreeable to whatever they say. Again, they also posted, this journalist that I was telling you about also posted that according to the leader of Falun Gong, 400 million Chinese people had died during COVID. And I'm like, hold on, that's more than the population of the United States. And yet the economy
Oh,
did not
maybe
go
that's
up.
the people they rescued from the CCP. It's the same number.
Oh, they reincarnated. I didn't know that they believed in that.
Anyway, there's a couple of ways to look at this. When organizations like Falun Gong and like the State Department tell you it's dangerous to visit China, you shouldn't visit China, it's difficult to travel to Xinjiang, or it's impossible to travel to Tibet, and none of these things are true. When they tell you this, they make it very difficult for you. And what we do here, and I've always said this, if you want to know, if you really want to know what's going on in China, come to China and ask the Chinese. That's the simple way of doing it. Now, of course, that's cost prohibitive. It's always been difficult. During COVID, it was impossible, but it's never been more easy than it is today to come to China. Now, you can do that digitally and you can do that physically, because a
Mm.
lot of countries, I think 56 countries now, don't need a visa for 30-day visits. Now, if you come to China and visit, I will openly welcome you to China. I'm meeting on Sunday, I'm meeting a guy from the United States who's coming to China, not just to visit me, he's coming here anyway, but he's going out of his way to come to Zhongshan to visit me. And I will always say this, if I'm around, if it's possible, I will meet with anybody who wants to come to China. Now, there's the difference, because the State Department says it's too dangerous to go there. You might get attacked with a knife. Yeah, that happened. You might get run over by a car. That's happened. And you might get arbitrarily arrested. That's never happened. But you're far more likely to get shot in the face by a police officer in America than you are by a police officer in China. The statistics, we've talked about it before, 7 hours. Every 7 hours on average, the US police kill somebody. And every 7 years on average, the Chinese police kill somebody. I don't know of a single person ever who's been arbitrarily arrested. And if someone can give me the name of someone who has been arbitrarily arrested, I'll retract that statement. But I don't know of anybody who has.
I think I've also just met somebody, basically through you, who wants to come to Dongguan, who wants to come and visit Dongguan and wants to talk to me and say, like, show me around, tell me about what you've experienced with your 24 years in the city, the changes, and like I'm more than willing to do that if I'm still in the city. Um, that's ideally what we would like to do. Like, look, you come to China and you don't know where to start. Okay, I can show you around. I can tell you. I can
Yeah.
indicate the things that you could explore further by yourself if you want. Because, yeah, China is a huge country. It can be a little bit daunting. You could be
It's the
tempted to
world's
just go to
largest
the touristy
Potemkin
places.
village, according to some people.
Uh, there was it was there's a I think it's an African guy on Xiaohongshu who takes videos from one of these gentlemen that we were talking about. Yeah, this two YouTubers, and he's showing a high-speed train, and the food tray is just shaking and shaking and shaking. I'm like, when have you? I mean, first of all, imagine traveling at 350 kilometers per hour, and the train is doing this. But just physically, that's not possible, right? So that can't be. It cannot literally happen. But again, it goes to the viewers. It goes to the people who just let themselves be lied to
Mm.
without questioning anything. 350 kilometers an hour,
It
something
would leave the
doing
track.
this, it's just
No.
going to be out of the rails in no time.
Yeah.
So it's the people that are unreachable. I know that you introduce your channel and your social media as you're trying to talk to the people who want to know the truth and who want to, you want to
Yeah.
reach out to those people. There are some people who are really just beyond redemption.
I believe that's right. There are many people, and this is why I'm over the years I've become quite intolerant towards those people who have a view that they're right and I'm wrong, and they've never set foot in China, and I must be getting paid to say what I'm saying. Well, yeah, okay. If I get paid, that's fantastic. I get paid because you watch me and you watch the videos and you watch the adverts, and that's my answer to these people. Thank you very much for doing that. But most of them don't watch. I mean, a lot of them, you know that they've just commented on your thumbnail. I'm not interested in talking to those people if they have no interest in an open mind. And I handle about 500 messages every single day through my various different platforms. I'm on Twitter, I'm on YouTube. I've also got a small TikTok, which I'm not really very proactive on, but it's there. And I've got this, I get emails. I get lots of emails every single day, 20, 30 emails from people asking questions about China. I'm very happy to answer them, but I'm not happy to speak to anybody who is just going to waste my time. So that's the reason why I reach out, or anyone who reaches out to me with a reasonable and responsible question will get a reasonable and responsible response. And that happens a lot. I even get people who are negative, but I'll give them a reasonable and sometimes a lengthy response. And you can see that if you go through my, particularly my YouTube responses. Twitter does limit me.
I also put lengthy responses in your videos as well.
I've seen you. Yes.
There's one element of misinformation, which is what the channel is about and what my website is about and what we're talking about here. Uh, in the event of the PLA Navy doing exercises in the Tasmania Sea, the Sea of Tasmania, there was a picture that was circulating through a lot of media. I saw it in the Wall Street Journal of some people behind them,
Yeah.
some body of water, and then at the end, some ships, some military ships. And I was like, okay, if this is taking place 300 kilometers from shore or more, there is no telephoto lens in the world that can actually get that photo. I mean, maybe if you're
Well,
on another vessel, you're on another ship, perhaps.
yeah.
But the idea that they're selling is look how close they are to the coast. Look how close they are to
It's a
Australia.
complete fake. Yeah. They show the silhouettes of the back of two heads, and in
Hmm.
between the two heads, you can see the ships moving across the water. Well, either that's not off the coast of Australia and that was taken maybe off the coast of China somewhere, or it's on a ship which is off the coast of Australia to take that picture. Now, that's a possibility. But if they've got journalists embedded on those ships, there must be a reason why they have that. But I raised that on a post on my Twitter the other day saying, Australians, bearing in mind that these ships are minimum 150 nautical miles from the coast of Australia, when you look at this picture, do you or do you not feel conned? Because you know that those ships are 150 miles away, but they are showing those ships from the shore. They're showing as if they're taking that picture from the shoreline of Sydney and look at those ships. They're right over there. They're really close. No, at one stage they were over 400 miles, not kilometers, miles away. So it's 600, more than 600 kilometers away from the shore.
That is the textbook definition of misinformation and
Yeah,
deliberate framing of
yeah.
a story with an image. I also watched, I think it was the prime minister saying, talking about this exercise, and like, we would have hoped that there was not sufficient antillation or sufficient warning of these
Mm.
exercises. So backtrack a little. There was information, but not sufficient. They did tell
No one,
you, but they didn't give you all the details.
yeah,
Remember
no one
that
in
that meeting
media
that they
has
had in
mentioned.
Beijing on the 17th of
Yeah,
February. It
on the
was all about
17th of
transparency.
February, and media has ignored this completely. On the
Mm.
17th of February, senior defense leaders from Australia sat down with senior defense leaders from China in Beijing in the resumption of the strategic dialogues that they had.
Mm.
Now, these resumed last year in June when Premier Li Qiang was in Australia, and they started again this year on the 17th of February. And it was around about the 20th of February that we started to get these scaremongering stories. And one of the comments that was mentioned in the strategic dialogue, now you can read about this, believe it or not, on the Australian Defence Force. I read it on the Australian Defence Force, not in Chinese media, not in Western media, but I read it on the Australian Defence Force website that they discussed the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, how they would be transparent about their operations. And this tells me they knew exactly what China was doing and had okayed it. There's nothing not to okay because it was perfectly legitimate and perfectly legal. And then some people say, well, what about, because this is a great whataboutism, if you say it's not right for China, for America to do this off the coast of China, it's not right for China to do this off the coast of Australia. And that's true. That's true. If America were only doing one sail past this is the first one China has actually done. It's not a regular thing. So if they had only done one several years ago and that was it, people would have said, oh, that's a bit out of order and left it at that. But they're not. The Australian Air Force was in Chinese restricted airspace.
On the 13th. On the 13th.
Yep, this is the.
What are the chances that they talked about it on the 17th? Like,
yeah,
what are you doing, man?
Yeah. So the Chinese Air Force with, and I'm not kidding you here, a spy plane. That's what they call it. Even the Australian media call it an Australian spy plane, and flares were dropped in front of it. But that is, under aviation law, a perfectly legitimate, appropriate escalation after warnings have been given. You give warnings before they enter your airspace. If they enter your airspace, you drop flares in front of them. If they continue on their path, you can shoot them down. That is the international aviation law. So
let me remind you of the 2024 Paris Olympics when the Taiwanese team flew back from having won a couple of medals. They had jets shooting flares in front of the plane. So it's not dangerous when they do it on purpose, but it's dangerous when you do it to another plane. You're just indicating, hey, pay attention to us. If you haven't seen us, here we are. So it's okay to do it to Olympians, but it's not okay to do it
now,
to a spy plane.
If China's ships had have been sailing towards Australian waters, then Australia has a right to feel threatened, and it has a right to prevent them. Now, I'm not sure about UNCLOS's United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea's escalation, but water cannon is part of them, and that's what China does to the Philippines. Water cannon is a genuine legal option as an escalation. But if China's ships were approaching Australian waters, they could have been water cannoned. And if they enter after being denied permission, after being warned, they could be shot down or sunk. They could be. Now, of course, Australia would be mad to do that, absolutely mad, but they just want to create a media scene about it. That's all this is. This is just media creating fear. That fear should not be there. There is no need to fear. I was telling a Chinese friend of mine last night over dinner, I said, do you know there are people in Australia who think China is ready to invade them? And her eyes went, whoa. Why would they think that? Because their media tells them every day that this is true. And media is saying China is preparing for this. And that's what this sail past is. They're testing our reflexes to see if we can hold them at bay. Somebody made an very interesting comment about these three ships. One of them is a supply ship. So it's probably armed, but it's not a military ship per se. It's a supply ship. The other two are military ships. And they have the same firepower as 72% of Australia's Navy. These two ships.
I don't know. I think for a lot of people, just to look at the numbers of what is done to China legally for the most part, and what China has done in Australia. I ran a search of all the different military exercises that Australian Navy and Air Force and whatnot have
Yeah,
done in the South China Sea, and I got the list from 2022. It's a very long list.
yeah,
And you don't hear Chinese people saying like, "Oh no, the Australians are going to invade us," but
no,
they're out there almost every month or every 2 months doing exercises as we speak. As we speak, or probably 2 days ago, the French were doing military exercises with the Philippine Navy. This is like, ask
yeah,
yourselves what would, well, now you don't need to ask yourself, you know what it feels like if you're in Australia, what it feels like to have a navy ship from another country just showing strength
mm,
400 kilometers from
yeah,
shore.
and
Imagine
with
if the Americans were doing that around, I don't know, Catalina Island.
yeah. I would be very happy if these three ships. I don't know where they're going. They've passed down the bottom, and they're obviously trying to rescue Tasmania from the People's Republic of
Awesome.
Australia, and the Republic of Australia and the People's Republic. I saw that meme as well. But they've passed down the south, and I don't know where they're going, and I'm sure others do, but I don't know where they're going. I haven't researched this, but I'd be really happy if they just continued on all the way down the south and then all the way up the southern continent of South America, and then stopped in Cuba for a few days just for replenishment and a chat with the local Cubans.
Yeah,
I think that
dude.
would be a wonderful experience because that's exactly what America are doing by having properties in Guam, Japan, South Korea, and and military bases in Taiwan, which is a province of China that they recognize. So they've actually invaded Taiwan, legally
It is a
invaded
slow
Taiwan
motion
under the
invasion.
United
It's a
Nations
slow
Charter.
motion invasion of Taiwan.
Yeah, correct.
I
Yeah.
always ask these three questions. Does China have troops in Taiwan? No.
Nope.
Does China has armament in Taiwan? No. Does China break diplomatic protocol when it comes to Taiwan
Well,
or China or the US?
technically, China
No.
does have troops in Taiwan, and technically, China does do all of these things because Taiwan is China. So,
Yes, yes. But I'm
you know,
saying it's not. You know what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
These are U.S. troops in Chinese territory. That is agreed by State Department, all the three communiques,
mm,
109, 180 something countries, the UN, everybody from the Cairo to everybody
yeah,
agrees that Taiwan belongs to China. Interesting to see. There's also been a lot of news talking about the removal of that particular sentence in the State Department website, which says we do not support the independence of Taiwan. Um,
mm.
what's your take on that? And is that the world turning pro-China?
No. I'm a little frightened by the fact that they've removed that because um, I wrote an article and made a video the other day about presidential promises. They're not worth the paper they're written on. Kind of prove this by going back in time to the formation, even the colonies before the formation of the United States of America. The colonies, the American colonies, were reneging on treaties that they'd signed with the locals. And they've reneged on pretty much every treaty that's been signed. I think I found the number was 368 broken treaties with their native Americans. So I mean that's not 368. That's not like a percentage. All 368 treaties that were ever entered into have been broken. That's how they operate. And we now know that three presidents have come to China, and three presidents have said we recognize Taiwan. Three presidents have said we will pull out of the arming and the troops. But I think it was just after Carter did that, he said we're going to pull all the troops out of Taiwan. The Congress said no, we're not. we're going to write the Taiwan Relations Act, which gives Congress the approval that the president doesn't have. So we've overridden the president's decision. So that tells you there's no point in dealing with the US president, none whatsoever. Now, what they've done is they've removed this phrase, "we do not support independence." Now, what does that mean? It now means that they have, and I didn't call this salami slicing, I call this sashimi slicing, because on the same day in the same week, or in the same week, not necessarily the same day, Japan recognized that people who are long-term residents of Japan could use the name Taiwan as their country of origin. Instead of China Taipei or Chinese Taipei, they're now allowed to use Taiwan. So the same day that, or the same week, I think, that America removed the "we don't support independence" clause, Japan salami sliced, or sashimi sliced, another little piece of the wedge away. And this is what they're doing. It's just one little thing. You called it a slow motion invasion. Other people have called it a salami slicing. They are literally taking one step at a time until the point where there's no salami left and there's only slices, and it's all history. And that's what China
But they
is
were
trying
so
to say,
upset
slow down.
with the turmoil in South Korea.
Yeah, well, that's another story, isn't it?
That's we're losing control of a puppet. But the other thing that I'm very concerned about, and again, we are probably the only source of this kind of information that you people get about this, what's taking place in Latin America. Because you see now that there are talks out there so that Mexico starts imposing tariffs on China in order to congratulate themselves with the US so that their tariffs are just waived or reduced or whatever. So I can see a movement in Latin America where America starts to squeeze these countries into doing things like, well, either impose tariffs on China or maybe go the way of, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Um,
I don't think
it,
America has the clout anymore. They think they do. They believe they do. But I think the rest of the world is now looking and saying maybe they don't. But it needs to be tested. And Colombia, your own country, tested it a couple of weeks ago. And both countries claimed a victory on this, but America didn't win. But it did claim a victory because it got what it wanted. So, but it didn't win the way that it wanted to win. And I think we're going to see, particularly after the BRICS conferences next month in Brazil, and I think we're going to see the global South now realizes that it is collective. We're going into a global South collective now. The global South has the power, which it never had before because it never had the unity. But now it has the power to say to the United States, we, as a group, the global South, do not want to conform with your conditions. Now, what Trump has said, he'll put 100% tariffs, 150% tariffs. He can put 1,000% tariffs on it. It really won't make any difference. If one country stops trading with the United States and starts trading only with the global South, but only if all countries in the global South agree. Because what's happening, and I know this for a fact, I'm going to do a show on this in a few months' time when this is all over. I've got a friend here his company has been sanctioned by the Americans. And because his company has been sanctioned, the Bank of China won't give him the money that he has to keep his business afloat. This is money inside of China that he needs, and he needs access to it. Because the Bank of China is saying, well, you've been sanctioned by America. So if we overturn their sanctions and we give you the money, they can sanction us. So there's the fear. This is a collective fear that the rest of the world has, not about them being sanctioned themselves, but about them helping someone who is sanctioned and then being sanctioned themselves. This is the fear that America does. This is the bully of the global North. They are saying, we will sanction anybody who breaks our sanctions. So the collective South needs to be cohesive. It needs to have leadership. and Brazil may very well provide that for them in the coming weeks. And if the Brazil don't, then China will or Russia will. It will happen. It may not happen this year. It may not happen next year, but it will happen when the collective South suddenly says, America, you're going to have to stop doing this to us because we will stop trading with you. And the latest one was putting a $1.5 million tariff on a Chinese
On
built
all
ship
vessels.
arriving in the United States. Okay, simple. Let's spend a month not sending one ship to America. See how that goes for them. The only thing this will ever do is put the cost up for Americans. Yes, it puts the cost up for Chinese ship owners. It puts the cost up for any Chinese ship that is, I mean, they're talking about flagships that were built in China. So if you're a South Korean and you bought a ship from China and you
Now you will
register it
do
in
this.
South Korea or in Panama or wherever you register it, your ship will be subject to a $1.5 million tariff if it arrives in San Diego port. How is that going to work for anybody? How is that going to benefit anybody? And then they're saying if it's an American built ship, you'll get $1 million back as a rebate. So hang on a second. How many American built ships are there in the world? They don't have enough ships. China holds, I mean, this is what China has the power to do. Almost every container in the world is Chinese. There are a couple of other companies, Maersk and a few others that are Scandinavian, but almost every container in the world is Chinese. So it's like 60, 70% of all the containers in the world that go on ships. This will be the next thing America says. If your thing comes in a container made in China, we're going to charge you more for it. How is that going to help Americans? How does that help anybody? It just beggars belief that people think, what sort of economist thinks that this works?
It's not about economy. It's about just
Bullying.
it's a bull in a china shop. It's just wrecking things around, and we'll see what comes out of this. You mentioned the global south, and when I think about the global south, I think about my corner of the world, and there's an issue with us is that we don't have, for whatever reason, the unity that other regions may have. We don't have ASEAN kind of unity. We don't have well, the EU, for all its bad things, it's at least a group. We don't have that in Latin America. We've tried, and it's never been allowed by the guys in the north. Just to give you an example,
You know why you don't have it?
because they
You
don't
don't
want
have
to.
it because you have US NGOs and you have US aid going in there. There's going to be a little less of that. You don't have this. This is how it works. You can't have cohesion when you have division. Simple, really simple.
I'll give you an example of something that occurred. There's a group called the CELAC, basically Central America, Latin America, and the Caribbean, all these 30-something countries that gather around every couple of months to discuss different things. They had an important meeting at the end of January, and it had to be canceled because there was so much turmoil, which what this bull was doing in the China shop located in Latin America. They're like, sorry, we have too much to deal with. And that was canceled.
That's exactly what America wants. As long as they can force some members into opposite camps and pay for those. Argentina would be one, for example. Argentina's in dire straits right now. Even worse now that their new president is likely to be convicted of criminal activities. But Argentina is going to throw the spanner in the works. Even Mexico now, Mexico is very anti-American right now, but even Mexico has got problems because if it goes too far anti-American, it will lose its trade. Now, Mexico is probably in the most vulnerable position, more vulnerable even than Canada, to American bullying, because there are massive numbers of products going through Mexico and into America. I'm talking legal products, not the illegal ones, but the legal products that go into America through Mexico have been building up hugely. China's trade is growing with North America, but it's growing with
Being
Canada and it's
Mexico.
growing with Mexico, and it's not growing with the United States, which is the biggest market. But Mexico and Canada's markets are growing with the United States. So where are all those products coming from? They're coming from here. So you can see why Mexico is vulnerable to that. And as long as those countries are vulnerable to American bullying, America is now 15% of global trade, or 15.9, less than 16% of global trade. As that reduces, because most Americans can't afford to buy items now. This is a fact. Many Americans cannot afford to buy. They are getting more and more indebted. And that's a big problem for America. Only the rich can afford to buy things. And the rich are getting richer, but the group is getting smaller. The middle class in America is shrinking as well, and the impoverished is growing. So they have a massive inequality problem, and it needs global trade, and it needs proper global trade under World Trade Organization regulations, without the tariffs, without the restrictions, and they can recover. But they can't recover the way they're going. And really, they're going to need China to recover, but that isn't going to happen under Trump's watch. It wasn't going to happen under Biden's watch either.
I want to give this video a final twist,
Yeah.
and listen to your comment. We've been asking if the world has turned pro-China all of a sudden. What I see is a lot of people in America turning pro-Russia. How does that make the world feel? And pro-Russia with the intention to turn their eyes on China. This was also in Project 2025, right? Like basically leave the Europeans to deal with Russia, to deal with Ukraine. Trump has already said, oh, yeah, the fight can continue, but they just want to focus on how to deal with China. This idea of America, the president being pro-Russia, how do you square that in your mind?
I don't square it in my mind at all. Americans have an exceptionalism. Many Americans, not all. Some Americans are really nice people. Many Americans, though, particularly those who are in government, have this exceptionalism, and they think everybody wants to be like them. Why are so many people flocking to our country, they say? Because they have no choice. They're desperate for what you pretend you have, but you don't have. So they're flocking to your country, looking for something you pretend you have, and thinking you have it because your media has told them that you do. You're paved with gold,
because
and lots
Hollywood
of
has showed
opportunities.
them.
Yeah. So they've been misled into believing this is an American exceptionalism. Look at how great we are. We have freedom. We have democracy. No, you don't. You don't have anything. You have an impoverished nation that is being strangled and having the blood sucked out of it by capitalist vampires, capitalist corporate vampires. Now, let's go back to this Russia thing. Do you remember a year or 18 months ago, Tucker Carlson went to Russia? This was the first step. Tucker Carlson is a hugely popular right-wing media personality. He went to Russia and said, hey, it's all right, it's great. It's like this in the supermarket. It's fantastic. It's not like we thought it was. And everybody thought, and a lot of people said this to me, wouldn't it be great if he comes to China? He doesn't want to come to China. He doesn't want to do exactly what he did in Russia because he was set up to do that. That's all part of what we're seeing now. This is media manipulation. We have got one of the most popular American, right-wing American media personalities in Russia telling us that Russia is not all bad and interviewing Putin, and Putin is not all bad. He's a good guy and we should be friends with him. And now we've got Trump saying to Europe, Ukraine is your problem, not ours. They're your neighbors, they're not ours. We have no danger from them. And then we've got Trump saying to Putin, I want to do deals with you. And Putin saying, okay, let's do deals. But Putin has been on record many times. It doesn't matter which president you deal with. They come in a suit with a different color tie. It just doesn't matter what you deal with because you can't trust them. They don't change their policies. They don't change their ideas. They just use. And that's what Putin knows. Now, Putin and Xi Jinping are great mates. They've met several times. They've been to the games together. They've done things together. They've visited each other's countries many times or several times. These guys know. I can't. We're talking about this reverse Kissinger thing. People saying,
Mm.
"Oh, well, they're going to turn around and get using Russia to hive it away from China as they did China in 1976." No way on earth. It's extremely naive to think that Putin is that stupid. It
That
really
Putin
is.
cannot play with Trump's ego for 4 years, because after that he's gone. He's going to have to deal with somebody else.
Yeah.
Now, I want to wrap up this video with a question that I hope we can address, you and I, at some point.
Okay.
We're talking about leaders that have been in power for quite some time, both Putin and Xi.
Hmm.
Who's coming next? How will
I
that
actually, yeah,
shape?
it's an interesting one because a lot
How
of
will
people
that
said,
shape the world we live in? Because we're looking at people in their 70s,
Hmm.
close to their 80s. What's next for the world order, and how will that reshape what we are seeing taking place now? But is the clock running out?
no. First of all, Xi Jinping is only 1 year older than me, and I reckon I could do the job. No, I'm just kidding about that bit. But yeah, he's only 1 year older than me. So I mean, that, I don't consider myself too old to have a decent job. I just
Mm.
don't want one, and so I think he's okay in that respect. But think about where he came from. He came through a process of elections and selections, and he's come through an incredibly rigorous learning process for himself as well. You do not get to be a local party secretary until you have been educated. You've got to be a confirmed Marxist, confirmed socialist. Now, you may have different interpretations on how they're going to work if you get into power, as Xi Jinping did, as Deng Xiaoping did, as Mao did. Mao and Deng Xiaoping couldn't have been more polar opposites, but they were both socialists. And now you've got Xi Jinping, who's a little bit more like Mao, less like Deng Xiaoping. But I mean, even that, you can't say they're the same. They're not. Now, whoever comes through next, and there is a Politburo of 9 people, 8 people, including Xi Jinping, any one of them could, but they're all getting quite old. A lot of people have said, well, wouldn't Wang Yi be great? But Wang Yi is the same age. So if Xi Jinping is going to retire, then Wang Yi must retire fairly soon afterwards. You've got a few people. Another great one would have been Wang Huning, but he's even older. So
Mm.
yeah, we're coming to a time when China is going to go through a process of change, but the people who are selected and elected to manage
They've
that
all gone through the
change
same
have come
process.
through the same rigorous training, the same experiential learning, and have the same communist background. I mean, people say China's not communist. Okay, it's not capitalist either. It's socialist with Chinese characteristics, and everybody understands what they are. I would suggest that whoever comes next is got huge boots to fill, but is going to be okay, whoever it is.
Mm.
I don't know who it is. I wrote an article and sent it to the Global Times and said, "Oh, we're not publishing this. we can't publish speculation on what's happening after Xi Jinping." Okay.
We have yet to speculate a little bit of what the situation would be in a country like Russia. I mean, the same thing. I think that Lavrov is just such a statesman at the same stature of Wang Yi, but those are not the
Yeah.
people to fill those boots. They're not. That's not their role. Um, so yeah, that's a question that we're going to address in another video. Jerry,
Yeah,
my friend.
I think probably we've got the 2 sessions coming up next week or the week after next,
Yeah, on the
very, very
5th.
soon. We're not going to get announcements about what Xi Jinping is doing, but I would suspect that he's in his last 1 or 2 years.
Mm. Mark our words.
Yes.
All right,
Come
friends,
back to this.
that's all the
Okay.
time for today. Thank you so much for watching. And once again, if you like the content that we put out, make sure to hit the like button, comment, subscribe, share, and yeah, let's help this pro-China channels, pro-truth channels grow a little bit more with your following. Thank you so much, guys. And until we see you again, take it easy and bye for now.
Bye-bye, everyone.
And end recording.